All right, so moving on to the next segment, we're going to switch gears here to the MMA world inside the UFC world. And I'll be sharing my thoughts on who I believe is the most dominant UFC champion in UFC history. So there's been so many Hall of Famers that have held championship gold in the UFC, but this particular fighter I do believe has been the most dominant UFC champion in UFC history. So that would be the GOAT, Jon Jones. I do believe that Jon Jones is the most dominant UFC champion in UFC history. I think Jon Jones has showed that he's the most dominant champion in UFC history. Being a two-division world champion, two-time light heavyweight champion, the reigning defending heavyweight champion in the UFC today, is 16-0 in world title fights. 16-0 in world title fights is absolutely incredible, insane. And he's held his title run when he held the light heavyweight title from 2011 to 2015 for 4 consecutive years of straight pure dominance, helped him build his resume to being the best UFC fighter of all time, with countless incredible moments and countless incredible victories against fighters like Quentin Rampage Jackson, Victor Belfort, Rashad Evans. 2 victories against DC, gained for to become the heavyweight champion, made it look like a piece of cake, a cakewalk. Stipe, the greatest heavyweight champion of all time. Jon Jones' resume is top notch, it's top tier. It's the reason why I do believe that he is the most dominant champion in UFC history, based on how he's done it, who he's beat, and when he's in these championship fights, sometimes it looks like a one-sided affair. So I do believe that Jon Jones is the greatest UFC champion of all time. Now, I do have 2 honorable mentions here. These 2 honorable mentions would be right behind Jon Jones and honestly would be in the conversation of being the most dominant UFC champions in UFC history if Jon Jones never existed. So, honorable mention number 1 would be Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva was one of the most dominant champions in UFC history. I mean, Anderson Silva is known for being the greatest middleweight fighter in UFC history and known for being the greatest middleweight champion in UFC history, paving the road for the likes of Israel Adesanya, Dricus du Plessis, Sean Strickland, and so many others that compete at this division today. Anderson Silva held that title for a total of 2,457 days for 7 years, from 2006 all the way to 2013, and also had a total of 10 consecutive title fights, 10 consecutive title defenses, before he finally lost the middleweight title to Chris Weidman in 2013. So Anderson Silva definitely in the conversation for being one of the most dominant UFC champions of all time. And last but not least, my final honorable mention would be Amanda Nunes. Now, I do believe that Amanda Nunes has set the tone of what it's like to be one of the most dominant UFC champions in the company's history. And she dominated everybody in her path. She was the first ever UFC women's fighter to become a double champion. Only a few selective fighters have ever done that in UFC history, that being Conor McGregor, DC. Amanda Nunes is in that conversation. And Amanda Nunes had a total of 10 successful title defenses with some incredible victories over some of the baddest women that we've seen step foot in combat sports. I'm talking Ronda Rousey, Chris Cyborg, Shevchenko, Juliana Pena. And when she retired last summer in 2023, she retired on top, being a double champion, holding the bantamweight title and the featherweight title in the UFC. That is an incredible way to retire. Retiring on top as a double champion. So those are the following UFC fighters that I do believe are the most dominant UFC champions in UFC history.